This video demonstrates the use of 2D arrays in C++. I'm going to write a program that calculates the overall score across 3 quizzes for a student, and there's going to be 5 students in total. So all we have to do is add up the 3 quiz scores and then output those for each of the students. So we're going to use a 2D array in order to organize this information. Each row is a student, and each column will be a different quiz. And so we can start by creating grades, and each quiz is out of 20 points. And so we can put quiz grades to be more particular. We quiz grades, and how many rows are there? Well, the number of rows is the number of students. So we'll put students will be a variable, and how many is that? That is students is 5. And actually we'll make this a little bit more meaningful name. We'll say number of students. Copy paste that. And then we have the number of quizzes. And the number of quizzes we need to initialize will be 3. And so we have a 2-dimensional array. The first dimension is the number of students. The second dimension is the number of quizzes, which means it's a 5 by 3. So there's going to be 15 pieces of data in there. And that sounds right. And the next thing we'll need to do is, actually we should probably compile, make sure we haven't broken anything yet. So let's just compile. Actually, let's make sure to add WALL. Aha, WALL caught something, which is unused variable. Quiz grades. And that's right, we have not used that variable yet. We will. Okay, that's good. No runtime errors, no compilation errors. We just haven't used quiz grades yet. Alright, so we need to initialize quiz grades. One way we could do that is we could put quiz grades at location 0. So for student 0, and for the first quiz, score was 15. And we could have first student, second quiz, score was an 18, improves. And first student, third quiz, they had a 17. Okay, so how are we doing so far? Let's go ahead and recompile. We're doing well. Now this is one full student, so I'll just go ahead and put a comment. It says first student. All right, and how would we go about summing these up? What we can do is write a for loop. So we'll need a variable for the row, and the row will be 0, in fact, but we'll also need a variable for the column, and we will be looping through the column in this case. The row will remain at 0, but the column, which is the quiz, will be changing. And so actually we can probably give these better names. What would be a better name? We could put student, and we could put quiz. Yeah, that's a better naming scheme. So while quiz is equal to 0 and quiz is less than the number of quizzes, then we can increment quiz. And we're going to be looping through the array for the first student, and we're going to be looping through each of the quizzes. All right, so let's just do a simple cout and see if we're getting the right output here. Let's compile. We have an unused variable student. That's right, we haven't used this variable yet. That's okay. And we have 15, 18, 17. Those are the right outputs from the first students. Those are each of the quiz scores. And so we could sum quiz. I'll make that a variable. We'll initialize to 0, and each of the loops will just add the current quiz, so that way we'll add all the quizzes together by the end of the loop. And we could output the sum. I'm going to add a little bit of context just to say this is the sum. Let's compile. Still aren't using the variable student yet. Okay, that's fine. So we've summed up the quiz scores. And we know the maximum quiz score is going to be 60 since each quiz has 20 points. So we could even add a little more of a output here, which would be out of 60. Let's go ahead and throw that in See what that looks like. That's the same warning. So sum 50 out of 60. Alright, that's fine. Alright, so now we have a good idea of how to do this for one student. So we could enter in the second student. How's this going to change things? So I'm going to copy the first student because there's many similarities. The one difference is we're looking at the second student, so I change that. And then also, of course, the scores changed. And this student didn't do so well at first. Did all right on the second one, but came down again on the third. All right, so this second student, if we run the program, why don't we go ahead and do that? We'll execute. We're just seeing the first student. How can we add this in to see the second student? Well, we need another loop, and that loop is going to encompass what we have currently for calculating the first student. So now we need to generalize this a little to work for a second student. So let's create another loop, which is going to loop over student. So student will be equal to 0, student less than, and we're going to say 2, because right now we just have the 2 students. And we'll continue to increment over the students. I'm going to indent this code that was intended for summing up the quiz score for one student. All right, and so what else needs to happen? Let's go ahead and compile and see how it looks. So we have a repeat output. So it looks like it just went over the first student twice. Why is that? That is because we really are just going over the first student twice. So we're going to replace the zeros in the student row, in the student part of the arrays, with student. So instead of 0, we'll have student. And that will generalize, so that we'll loop through each of the students now and output their scores. Let's go ahead and try this out. There we go. We have student 1, and the scores printed out. We have student 2 with the scores printed out. It's looking pretty neat, fairly general. So we have 3 students to enter, and we could enter them in the same manner. But I'm going to show you another way to initialize, which is a little bit cleaner method, but that's arguable. Let's go ahead and take a look at what it looks like though. So I will open brace and close brace, and now I will have, for each student, I'll put their scores. So there's the student 1, and then I'm going to add in the scores for student 2, and we'll have the same pattern for each of the remaining students. So I have student 3, 4, 5. Fifth student will not have an additional comma. Let's go ahead and fill in zeros for now, just to make sure we have the right initialization going on. Alright, let's try this out. Compile. We have an error. Quiz grades may not be initialized. The variable size object quiz grades. Let's see, quiz grades. This is an error on line 21. And why may it not be initialized? Is because we have variables that are contributing to the size of this. And in fact, what we should be using are consts variables, because we are not going to be changing these at all. So that's a good error to have. And there we are. We add const, and it's no longer an error, and that's because these are no longer variable sized, they're constant sized. They're constant values, and that means the array is going to be a constant size at compile time. So we can go and run the program, and we get the same output we had before. Oh, and that's because actually we're overwriting our values. Let's delete this code and see if our initialization is actually working and not with the overwritten values. And the initialize is working just fine. Okay, so we can go ahead and add in the remaining students. This individual was a very good student, had all perfect scores. The 4th student did pretty well. And the 5th student did a medium well. Okay. And we can make these a little bit more readable by using a little bit of spacing. And this is all just about making this easy for the human to read. We can easily see now this array is 2-dimensional. Each row, the student, and then each column is the quiz score. So quiz 1 is the first column, quiz 2, quiz 3. All right, let's go ahead and run the program after compiling. And we're still just getting 2 students, and that's because we had hard-coded in 2 students. But now we're ready to go to the full number of students. Let's take a look after compiling. The student got the perfect score. We have a... Yeah, there we go. We have an additional output. We probably don't need this anymore. That output was useful for debugging early on, but now it's just becoming extraneous. And we can further improve this output by indicating which student this sum goes to. So we'll call it student, and then we'll put the student number, which is student plus 1. So it'll be student 1, student 2, student 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to move this to the next line to make that a little easier for me to read. So student sum. There we are. Let's compile, execute. So student 1 sum. We could add a space there just to make that a little nicer looking. Student 1 sum. And there we go. Thank you.